Yes, hello everyone. Welcome back to another interview here on An Cluiche with me, Seamus Brady, your host for this one. I am joined by Malachy Clerkin. This is interview 19 here on the show. This is an Irish Times sports writer. Malachy, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on today. How are you?
Thank you for having me on, Seamus. Is delighted to do it. I'm doing great.
Good stuff, good stuff. Me too. We were talking there off air. You were saying we're fresh off the back. At the time of recording, we're fresh off the back of round 5 of the Allianz Football Leagues. This league has been a bit crazy. I mean, you've got Derry absolutely flying, but then Dublin beat them this weekend. We have stories left, right, and centre. Kildare falling in Division 2, Cavan flying in Division 2. There's stories everywhere you look. What have you made of the Allianz League so far?
Yeah, it's an odd one because I think teams are still getting a little bit used to the schedule. Like, we're sitting here on the first Monday in March, and it's absolutely freezing outside. Though there's still the last bits of a snowman in my front garden that me and my wee girl built last Friday, and the championship is 4 weeks away. So it's I think teams are getting used to a different sort of schedule. Usually this time of year you'd be 10 weeks away from the championship, and now teams are like basically the championship's a month away. So like over the weekend, like even injury wise, like Lee Gannon pulled his hamstring Saturday night for the Dubs. Owen McLaughlin pulled his hamstring from Mayo. Are those guys going to be back for the start of the championship? Probably will be very tight. So it's I think a lot of teams are basically their first job was basically get to 6 points so that they don't have to worry about relegation. Now the teams that are worrying about relegation have to decide whether they care about getting relegated or not. Like obviously down Division 2, it will affect getting to play in the Sam Maguire or not. But for say the bottom of Division 1, the Monaghan have had a terrible league. They're after getting 4 hidings in a row. They have to go to Tyrone in the next game. And they have Cavan in the preliminary round in Ulster in the first week of April. So are they really going to kill themselves to stay in Division 1? Are they going to choose that over the Ulster Championship when, Sam Maguire is what matters, or the Sam Maguire Championship? So I think it's I think everybody is still flying a wee bit blind. Do you know what I mean? Like I think everybody's kind of trying to get a panel together, trying to get everybody fit for the start line. And in a way, I think there's almost more of a phony war than ever about the league.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I'm not sure.
There's a lot of shadow boxing going on, but at the same time, one of the things that I find gas is Dublin won it last year. They won the All Ireland, but all of a sudden, everyone was saying as if Dublin had mastered this art of deciding to win at a certain stage. Like that's a lot. It's a buzzword now that if a team loses, it's like, oh well, they'll win in the league, as if it's as easy as clicking your fingers and going, okay, now we're going to start winning games. Dublin just hit form at the right time, and other teams ran out of gas, and Dublin hit form at the right time and carried on. But like the Roscommon game, they wanted to win that game in Croke Park. It was a bad performance. It wasn't something that Dublin were tactically taking their foot off the pedal. Like, I just feel like in this, it is so condensed that injuries are having, as you said, as big an impact as they've ever had on the games. Because if you get injured in round 4 of the league, round 5 of the league, you could be out for the rest of the year. And that wasn't the case years ago.
Absolutely, yeah. But yeah, so I think you're right. Like, teams will still have good performances and bad performances, but if you looked across the teams that played, say, just the weekend gone by, I'd say outside of Kerry and possibly Mayo, very few teams had their best 15 on the pitch or anything approaching it. Now, I'd say Kerry had probably 12, maybe 13 of their first team out. Derry certainly didn't. Dublin probably didn't. Galway didn't. Monaghan didn't.
Galway is the most striking one. Galway and Monaghan are the most striking ones, that they are in the teams that are nearer to the bottom of the table, and they didn't put out their best 15s.
No, they probably put out as good a 15 as they could, like, because they're both have massive amounts of injuries, but maybe in other years, like they would be rushing players back a little more. They would be trying, like, we might be trying to get Shane Walsh and Damien Comer back a bit more. Conor McManus would have played more than just a substitute appearance by now, So I just think, everything is so much tighter, and everybody got a first taste of it last year. And so they're reacting now in a way to decide what their priority is going to be come the summertime. But it makes it all very interesting.
It definitely does, because teams have to approach it differently and everything. Make sure that it is very much a season now. It's a condensed. You don't get the breaks that you used to get. And then on top of that, when you're talking about relegation to Division 2, again, it's not the be-all and end-all. The last 4 All-Ireland finals, if you want to say 2020, Mayo had got relegated from Division 1 that year. They still made the All-Ireland final. 2021, Mayo were in Division 2. They made the All-Ireland final. 22, Galway made the All-Ireland final after being in Division 2. And last year, of course, Dublin won it from being in Division 2. So it's not that you're down there. And the gap is really not there between the top half of Division 2 and Division 1. Like, I think if Armagh, Donegal were up in Division 1, you could even argue Cavan, with the form that they've been showing, they'd still be picking up, results here and there and, putting up a fight to those teams. It wouldn't be a straight back down to Division 2.
No, I think you're right. Yeah. I think where the gap is between the top of Division 1 and the next sort of 10 teams. I think Dublin and Kerry are probably a bit ahead of everybody else. Derry, and I don't know who's along with Derry, maybe Derry, Mayo and Galway or whatever in the next tier. And then, the next sort of 7 or 8 counties could all play each other 10 times and win 5 each, that kind of thing.
And then going just now to you, you're off the back of an incredible year in sports journalism. You were named the Broadsheet Sports Writer of the Year for 2023. How did it feel to pick up this honour?
It was great. Yeah. Like those awards are like, they're great. You wouldn't want to place too much store in them, obviously, because they're all subjective judgments and all of that sort of stuff. But I really I had done some good work in the year running up to it, and some of the pieces that I entered really meant a lot to me. I did a piece about a young footballer who took his own life, and I did a piece about a jockey who became afraid of falling off horses, and I did another piece about young kids following David Clifford around the country watching club matches. And I think that's the sort of stuff that I try to do. It's not, I try not to be too obvious and not to kind of, do the stuff that everybody else will think of doing. And so, yeah, I was really, really delighted to win. It's over when it's over, and you kind of try and win the next year and all that sort of stuff. But no, it was great.
Yeah, and like the one thing that I noticed, particularly in the jockey piece and everything, was one of the things about your sports writing as well and your interviews and everything is it is rare that people remember that the athlete is a human being. With just everything like that. That's crucial. And the things that I was going to ask you is, when you're interviewing someone and when you're doing a piece with them, is that the most important thing to getting the best interview out of the athlete? To just remember that away from the sport, they're just another person.
Yeah. Like it's something that it sort of takes you a long time to really properly realize, because as we grow up and we're into sport, our concept of who these people are is so conditioned by watching them on TV or even seeing them in the flesh, they are able to do things that we're not able to do. And so we put them on a pedestal, and, we treat them differently because of this incredible skill and talent that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And we mean very well by doing that. We do that as a compliment to them, and we do it as, with a bit of yearning in ourselves that, oh, Jesus, I wish I was able to kick a ball like David Clifford, or, ride a winner like Brian Cooper or whatever. And I think if there was one thing that I sort of learned very quickly as a young sports journalist, was that you can't be intimidated by sports people, purely because if you are, then what you're doing is that you're bringing your interpretation of who they are to a new conversation. And you might think that being intimidated by them is essentially a compliment to them, or it gives them a kind of an upper hand. But actually, it's a sign of disrespect, really, when you think about it. Because what you're doing is that you're coming in to a conversation with preconceived ideas of who this person is. And anywhere in life, that's a disrespectful thing to do. And straight away, they sense that. You know what I mean? Like that they
think
they
that
feel it straight away that you have decided that you know who this person is. And if you do that, then they won't really tell you who they are. And I think the way that I work has basically always been about trying to get people to tell me who they are. That's like, if you want to draw a line through anything that I try to do, it's really that. And that can sound like an odd kind of way to approach sports journalism, because people want, they want facts, and they want stats, and they want to know, how teams are picked, or they want to know how, tactics are formed, or they want to know all of that. And that's all true, and it's all very important. But I think the best way to do that is to get people to tell you who they are. And the more people do that, the truer they are, the more insight you get.
No, that's very true. And like, on top of that, if they feel like that you're talking to them with that same respect, like, I think it's okay to have like an internal thing of like, wow, this is this person. But on the outside, you need to be composed, and you need to, conduct the interview.
Yeah, but you have to get over it as well, Seamus.
Yeah.
I definitely, Jesus, I remember first thing that I was sent to outside of, like, the first really sizable event that I went to was I'd say the 2002 Ryder Cup. And it was the one that was refixed after 9/11. You're far too young to know about any of this, but 9/11.
The Ryder 2001.
You probably heard of 9/11, all right, but the Ryder Cup was cancelled. It was supposed to happen a month later, and it was put forward by a year. And so in late September 2002 or early October, I went and covered the Ryder Cup. And so 2002, I was 24. I just turned 24. And this was my first time, I had covered a lot of GAA, but it was my first time. I think I might have done the odd Ireland soccer match, but like, it was the first time really being on the ground with people that I watched on television. And I really didn't do well. Like, I didn't write well, because I think I was intimidated by it. Like
Mm-hmm.
Tiger Woods was playing, Phil Mickelson was playing, Padraig Harrington was playing, um, all these sort of global stars, people that I would just kind of watch and be agog with. And I remember coming home from it, and I did fine. Like the stuff in the paper was fine. I was writing for the Sunday Tribune at the time, and I did okay. Like it was grand. And when I got back, a couple of people said they liked what I had written, but I knew myself that I had sat in press conferences and not put up my hand to ask a question. I had, when I had asked a question, I hadn't followed it up. I didn't have confidence in what I was doing, really. And I think at its heart, when I thought about it afterwards, was, you know what, you kind of got overwhelmed by it, kind of got a bit starry eyed, kind of got a little bit too, God, isn't it great to be at a Ryder Cup? And you have to get past it. You can't, like, it comes back to exactly what you're saying. They're just people. They're
Mm-hmm.
just people, and they have a skill that is incredible. But they if they drink a bottle of water, they gotta go to the toilet.
Yeah.
They're the same as everybody else. So you gotta treat them that way, and it takes a while. It definitely takes a while in sport, because everybody that gets into sports journalism is pretty much into sport first and journalism second, and uh, you got to get over it. You can admire them, and the more that you get attached to sports people and the more you're around them, the more you have a soft spot for them, because the more then you know exactly what it is that goes into who they are and what they put into it. But I kind of think that the flip comes when you get close and you realize that you admire them for the stuff that you know about them,
Mm-hmm.
rather than the sport. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that, like it, like just the fact that, I don't know, they're an Olympic boxer is great and it's brilliant. But like I've got to know, say, Kelly Harrington pretty well. Um, and I admire her for the person she is. You know, the boxer she is fantastic and is amazing, and to do what she has done is incredible. And I hope she gets another gold medal in Paris. But when I talk to her, the sort of soft spot I have for her is because of the person she is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's okay. I think that's a more legitimate sort of soft spot that you can have for a person. And you shouldn't let it blind you. Of course, when somebody does something wrong, you should call them out for it, as I did when Kelly got into trouble last year. But
Mm-hmm.
you gotta do it from a position of knowledge. And I think that's what really journalism is. It's it's knowledge. Like, we, especially in sport, we see so much sport on TV. We see so much of sports people on social media and all of that sort of stuff. Um, but if you're going to make judgments on people, you need to do the work to get to know what their motivations are, where they come from, what the building blocks of who they are. And that's the work. That's what the work is.
Well, that's it, and I do one of the best ads I've seen in a while. And when I seen it, I was like, "Thank God it's taken long enough for them to make an ad like this." But the take a moment ad where they have the fans criticizing the players and everything, or criticizing the ref, and it's just like the Lerker Gales for me is a perfect program in terms of how they just open that little window into who they are as a person, and they show you what they were going through. Like, for example, Richie Powers episode where it talked about his gambling addiction, things like that, where you're like, wow, I would never have thought at the time, just watching him, that
Mhm.
what was going on in the background at the time.
Yeah.
Thomas Niblock's interviews as well with the GA Social are fantastic. Like where he talks to people like Oisin McConville, he talks to people like Frank McGuigan. Like they're really, really good interviews. And that's it. That when you see the person behind the athlete, you get better answers out of them about their preparation, because they're talking about, their life and everything like that.
Very
And
true.
again, once you know the person, like I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing Tony Scullion for this. He was on. And then I watched his Lecker Gale after, and I was like, I didn't think it was possible to like him more. But I actually do now that I know fully his story, because the Lecker Gale hit on things that I didn't hit on during the interview.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and exactly. That's what I've found over the years, is that talking to people and finding out about people is, I don't know. Look, I just find it a more fulfilling way to go about the work than, I don't know, banging out 1,000 words about Man United every fortnight. Although I do that to the odd time as well.
Yeah, but one of the most, it's funny that you mentioned about working with them, and that the more you're there behind the scenes and everything. Like I'm 2 years into my journey. I started when I was 20. I'm 22 now. I'm like, the things that have helped me the most because I will admit, when I started when I was 20, I was very starry-eyed. If I got to interview anyone, I was very like, oh my God, this is great. The things that have helped me the most, when I kind of look at it, weirdly enough, is like having a cup of tea with someone, or having a few biscuits, and then you chat about the game, and you realize, actually, I can just have a conversation with this person. They are just normal.
Yeah.
Because when you hear them on telly so much, or you hear them on the radio, and then you hear them talking 2 feet away from you, you can be a bit like, oh my God, that's did it. But then once you talk to them, you realize it's just a normal bloke. Like, and for anybody outside of here who doesn't know who they are, they wouldn't be acting like you're acting just because you're a big fan of their work.
Yeah, but and also, like, television is such an odd thing. Like, television is such an artificial medium. Like sports television is, it's mostly about filling time in between ads, really. Because it exists because of advertising, and halftime analysis, full-time analysis, all has to be squeezed into a specific 3-minute 30 segment, and you have to fit 4 voices into those 3.5 minutes, and then go to the next ad break and all of that sort of stuff. So the way you see people on television is just not normal. It's not who they are, sitting down having a pint. So yeah, look, people are just people, and journalism is just telling people stories. There's a great line. Oh God, I'm going to sound very pretentious now, but there's a great line by Ernest Hemingway where he said something along I'm going to get it wrong too. Said something along the lines of, every man's life, deeply told, is a novel. I think it's something like that. And I like, that's like, the truth of that is right there. I have written pieces about like judo players and badminton players and junior football, soccer players who have one leg, kind of thing. And their story, once you sit down and put a tape in front of them and tell me about your life, like, you find great stuff there, rather than find far more interesting stuff than going to a Desi Farrell press conference. Like, we have to do that too. Like,
of course, but like bringing it back even before the Ryder Cup, I read that you got into it in 1999 after winning a sports writing competition. That was how you originally got into sports writing in the Irish Times.
Yeah.
What was that like when you realized that obviously you'd won?
Well, I don't know. Let's go. Well, I might even go back a bit further. Like, I had no real interest in journalism. I had no real interest in sports journalism. I was mad into sport, all right, but like, I had no notion of being a sports star. I wasn't one of these teenagers who wanted to be a journalist to fight injustice and change the world or anything like that. I wanted to be a teacher, really, and even at that, I don't know that I wanted to be a teacher. I just didn't have any great notion beyond. I liked school, so maybe I could go and be a teacher. And then I made a balls of my economics exam in my leaving cert and got like a bad C instead of a low A or something like that. And it cost me the points that I needed to get into St. Pat's in Drumcondra. And
That's where I
journalism
went.
was, did you?
Yeah.
Well, journalism was my second choice. And I went to DIT in Anger Street and kind of walked in the door going, I have no notion what I'm walking into here. Not that I had no real interest, but I was kind of going, okay, I guess I'll do this for a while and see where it takes me. And it was, this is, again, it's going to sound alien to somebody your age, but this was the 1997, and very few houses in the country had the internet, and the colleges were really only starting to get it. But the internet sort of exploded in our college around sort of 97, 98, 99. And with it, I basically found loads of old sports writing, old American sports writing. Mm-hmm. Sports Illustrated, you could read every article that had ever appeared in Sports Illustrated, going back to the 50s, you know. And by sitting reading that sort of stuff, I kind of got a sense of, yeah, I'd like that world. I'd like to be in that world.
Was there any particular work that you looked at? Any particular?
Yeah, like those writers like Rick Riley and Gary Smith, who are two completely different writers. Like Rick Riley was a kind of a piss take artist, a real kind of wisecrack guy. He wrote an 800-word column in the back of Sports Illustrated every week. Whereas Gary Smith wrote 4 pieces a year, and they were all about 12,000 words, and he'd spend, you know, months and months. He said one time that he never wrote a word until he had spoken to 50 people for an article.
Oh my God.
Oh, Jesus Christ. You know, so the two complete opposite ends of the scale there, you know, a guy sitting down writing 800 words every week, bang, 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 and another guy who's taken 4 months to write one piece. So even those two guys kind of appealed to me as, okay, so sports journalism can be this and sports journalism can be that, and presumably it can be everything in between as well. Like those are the two wide end of the spectrum. And so that was what that idea that, you know, because to me, like, sports journalism was going to matches and writing about the match and maybe getting a few quotes afterwards. And those two guys, or the work of those two, kind of made me go, well, no, sports journalism can be anything, really. You know, it can, like, people are into sport. They want to hear stories about the people who are playing the sport. Go and do it from there. And so that was what I did, you know. Now, I say all that now, you know, that's like 26 years ago, whatever the fuck it was. The piece I wrote for that competition in 1999, like, you know, I completely cringe at it now, you know. It was very studenty. So it was November 1999 that I entered this. So I was 21. I just turned 21. And the piece I wrote was a really studenty opinion piece about Irish soccer and the Irish inferiority complex when it came to global sport, and, you know, wild generalizations and stuff like that. Like, I wouldn't in a million years right now, or better again, that if a student journalist sent to me right now, I would kind of go, come on, who do you think you are? Like, you're just some young fella, which is what I was. Like, I was a young lad. Like, I came from Monaghan. Moving to Dublin was even a huge thing for me, you know, to be in a big city, or what I considered to be a big city, to be kind of to be in a place where, you know, at the drop of a hat, you could go out to a gig, or you could go to a match. Like, you know, you could headway to Talca Park or Daily Match. You could go to a soccer match. You could go to a rugby match. You could do whatever the hell you liked. You know, like you just weren't able to do that in rural Ireland where I came from. So I knew nothing about the world. Like I knew absolutely, and the best part was that I didn't know what I didn't know. I had no idea of anything really, and to be, you know, pontificating about the Irish inferiority complex is outrageously bad. But look, there were a few turns of phrase in it that caught the eyes of the judges anyway. And basically, I put this is going to sound like fake humility, but I put an awful lot of my life and my career down to luck, really, down to being lucky in the places that I've managed to get myself to. And like the most lucky of all was finding myself in the Sunday Tribune at that age. I won that competition. It came with two prizes. One prize was £500. Like, this is pre-Euro. The Euro wasn't even in yet. So £500 was about €650 in 1999, which, let me tell you, it's about having, in 2024, it's probably like having a grand handed to you as a 21-year-old student. It was an unbelievable prize to have. I couldn't I was working as a barman at the time to supplement, like, to go to college. Really, I was working in Wexford Street, which is now Opium in Wexford Street, or the Opium Rooms, I think it's called. It used to be the Mean Fiddler, and I was working there, like 3 nights a week, like taking home whatever 40, 50 quid a night, you know, to have a bit of walking around money, you know. But so, like, this was a colossal prize, but also what came with it was 2 weeks work experience. And I've always kind of joked that was the 2 weeks work experience was supposed to be in the spring of 2000, and the Sunday Tribune closed in the spring of 2011, and they still owed me my 2 weeks work experience because I didn't get my work experience. What I got instead was they basically put me to work, really. So I started off there on weekends. Like on a Saturday afternoon, it would have been my job to take in, like, the greyhound results from around the country and the rugby results from the AIL and put them on the page for the Sunday paper. And that's how I started, basically. I was in there weekends, kind of subbing copy and putting things together. And as time passed, I got chances to write bits and pieces here and there. So I was still in college, you know. I graduated from college in May 2001, by which time I'd already done 18 months in the Sunday Tribune. You know, that became my weekend job. I was able to give up the bar work, you know. But yeah, like, that was an enormous break for me, Seamus. Like, it really was, because it wasn't like just getting your foot in the door just anywhere. The Sunday Tribune was an amazing place to be a young sports journalist. If you look around, a lot of the sports journalists that people would know now, so many of us started in the Sunday Tribune. You know, if you take me, you take Paul Howard, you take David Walsh, you take Dennis Walsh, you take Enda McAvoy, Kieran Shannon, Miguel Delaney, Ewan McKenna, you take Philip Lanigan. Generations of us came through the Sunday Tribune, and we all came through it. We were all there as young kids. We all made all our mistakes, and we all got chances to to try and expand and try and learn how to do things, and it was a phenomenal place, and that's why I say I was lucky. Look, I know that once you get there, you have to do the work, and you have to be any good, and you have to be diligent, and you have to work at it, and there is no luck in longevity,
Yeah.
but I could very easily had, like I always say, like this sort of person that I was. I know a lot of sports journalists starting out. It's such a tough thing to start out with, because you have to hustle for freelance work, and you have to try and impress people with the work that you're sending in, and you have to send them in stuff. You have to get heard. You have to get noticed. And I know the person that I was when I was 21 would have been terrified of all of that. I just didn't have that kind of neck, that kind of moxie, that kind of, here, you got to listen to me. I'm the next good sports writer. I was very shy. I would have been very intimidated by sports editors and all of that sort of stuff. And but winning that competition, much apart from the cash, kind of it allowed me to jump the fence, really. And once I was in there, I could relax and could improve as time went by, because it was such a great place. It like the patience that they had, and the tradition that they had of bringing young sports writers along, was fantastic. It really it was the greatest break I ever had in my career, hands down, absolutely.
Yeah, well said. And then I am in agreement with you that you need a bit of luck, but then you also make your own luck as well. And if you work extremely hard, people are likely to, give you an opportunity and everything like that. And you, when you arrived onto the scene, 1999, this is a fantastic period of GA, because from 1999 up until 2007, when Kerry eventually went back to back, no one went back to back. It was Meath, then Kerry, then Galway, Armagh, Tyrone, Kerry, Tyrone, Kerry again. And the rivalry, of course, between Kerry and Tyrone was one of the rivalries that defined that era of Gaelic football. It was the rivalry that defined that Gaelic football era. What was it like to cover the games at that time?
Yeah, I'm like, I always laugh at myself back then, because it's a funny way. It's not that I wasn't really into Gaelic, but like, soccer was definitely my sport growing up. Really, I played far more soccer than I did Gaelic football. I watched far more soccer than I did Gaelic football. Now, that partly that was because Monaghan were appalling in the 90s. I think Monaghan won 2 championship games in the whole of the 90s. So it was not. It was definitely not a thing that me and my friends would do in the middle of the summer, take ourselves off to watch Monaghan get beaten up in Celtic Park or in Casement Park or Newry or wherever the hell, like there was certainly no trips to Croke Park for us,
That was it in the 90s. Like, I mean, the Ulster teams, Derry won the All-Ireland.
Well, the Ulster teams were great, but we weren't. We were shy. Like, we were really shy. So like, it's not that I wasn't into GA, but when you get into a place and you want to work and you want to be a sports writer, and they say, okay, will you do some GA? You go, yeah, I'll try. I know loads of GA. Well, now in a hilarious, like, there are definitely people, dubs in the Sunday Tribune then, that presumed that because I was from the country, I was big into GA. And I didn't disabuse them of the notion. I said, yep, sure, I cover it. Like, guarantee the first, whatever about Gaelic football, like, they sent me to cover hurling, like, and I really, really wouldn't have known which end of the stick to hold at that stage, so but yeah, so I started covering it. I'd say I covered, like, 2000 was the first championship I really covered for the Tribune. Armagh came through that championship. The All Ireland final went to a replay, Dublin, or not Dublin, Kerry and Galway. And so it was like Seamus Moynihan against Porrick Joyce and all that. So that was great, great introduction to it. And the next few years, the Ulster teams were great crack, and they were great to cover. They were full of interesting people, full of interesting stories. Armagh were great, Tyrone were great. The fact that they annoyed everybody down south was also great. So that was a lot of fun. And look, those Kerry teams were amazing. And look, it was a great time to cover GAA. I remember twice interviewing Colin Cooper the week of an All Ireland final, like going down to Killarney and having a coffee with him. In a way that you just can't do now, that's just not open to you. Same Cormac McAnallen the week before the Tyrone's first All Ireland final, 2003. This will tell you how young I am, or young I was. I'm not young anymore. But I had to get my mum to drive me up to the McAnallen house in Benburb in Tyrone, because I couldn't drive yet. I literally wasn't able to drive the car, so like I had my mother had to drive me up the road to meet Cormac McAnallen, but like, you were able to do this stuff. You were able to meet these really famous sports people in the run up to an All Ireland final, and like that sort of access is just gone. It just doesn't exist anymore.
That's one of the main things on top of that we were talking about, seeing the person behind it. But another key trait for your interviews, I imagine, especially because so many of the players now, another key component is trust. That person trusts you, that you're not going to put them in a difficult situation. You're not going to ask them about something that they don't really know how to answer. Like, you're not going to try catch them. And
no, exactly.
So if they know this is my friend, they'll do a better interview.
Yeah, well, to a certain extent. But look, certainly in the GAA now, that just doesn't exist at all. Really. So, certainly with the top teams, it's not a thing. You get the odd interview here and there during the league, but not really. Basically, well, look, there's no point sugarcoating it. Jim Gavin and the Dubs really killed it. They just decided
it was. I remember it was the Pat Gilroy year. Was, I think, the first one that I noticed a big difference.
But even that was a wee bit different. Gilroy was far more open. Gilroy used to have press conferences the week of league games, like on a Friday morning, up at St. Clair's, and they bring you in and you can meet 3 players and do all that sort of stuff. And that just went away altogether. So like the Dubs were, they just became completely averse to any publicity that they didn't control themselves. And look, they then won 6 All-Irelands in a row. But the problem was that everybody that was trying to stop them win the 6 All-Irelands in a row looked at them and went, well, if they're not doing it, then why the hell would we do it? And look, this is not me moaning at all. I gave up moaning about it a long time ago, because you've got to get on with life, and that's fine. I do think that the GA will lose out in the long run. I do think that.
When you look at the 2000s, just the one thing that I noticed when you looked at the 2000s, I'm not saying that it was just because Dublin would give the interviews at the time, but Croke Park had 82,300 people for Dublin versus Laois in the Leinster final in 2007. And it was also because of the way that Dublin played. Dublin were very rock and roll style football, where catch, kick straight down the field. And it wasn't this, we're going to hand pass, you're going to hand pass, and then shoot from a percentage position. Now, we didn't really do that against Kerry, but I remember 2021, I absolutely hated the way we were playing football in 2021.
Sure.
Just that the Mayo semi-final was a perfect example of that we dominated the ball for 50 minutes, and by the time that 50 minutes was over, we were only 4 points ahead, and Mayo undid it in 5 minutes because they actually went forward. So yeah, I think there is something to look at there, and this is the next question I'm going to ask you, is obviously in the GAA lately, we have a new president, Jarlath Burns. He's the 41st GAA president. His first address to the Congress, he did sound, I thought anyway, he sounded like he very much had his finger on the pulse. Everyone I've met who has met Jarlath has very much spoke to what a gentleman he is. And his first address, he spoke about the game, and he spoke about how he could make Gaelic football more attractive to both play and to watch.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, I'd be interested to see how that rolls out. The game is the game. It's the players that play the game. It's the coaches that dictate what the game is. I don't know how radical that group is going to be. Like short of, insisting that 3 or 4 players stay inside the opposition 45. I think it will need.
That's the difficult one.
Well, I think that would be reasonably enforceable. I don't get why people think that wouldn't be enforceable. Like, I don't understand how hard it would be.
Yeah, I suppose, but for example, if a player was to stand on the line or stand inside the line, or you could have a VAR style situation where his hand is over the line, so does that mean that he's in?
Yeah, but like, how often does that happen?
It's just because typical GAA fashion, I could see it happening in a big game, like where.
I don't know. I think the point is to change how the game is played. Like, it's not to try and live on the. It's not like an offside line. Like, it's that you change how the sport is played, and I don't know. I don't know how difficult it would be to enforce. I'm not saying that I necessarily think it should come in, but I will be interested. I think if you look at this league, even I think teams are kicking the ball a lot more. I think that could be partly down to, I think managers are tired of players getting injured, and so they don't want them running all day. And so maybe they're making them kick the ball longer.
That probably is.
Let the ball do the work. And will that really be the case in the summertime when the ground is harder and people can run for longer? I don't know. Yeah, look, I've seen an awful lot of GAA presidents come and go. I don't want to sound like a bored old fart here, but ultimately GAA presidents have very little power. A GAA president is a figurehead. He's a man that goes to an awful lot of rubber chicken dinners. He opens a lot of clubhouses. He hands out a lot of medals. He can have ideas and all of that sort of stuff. And certainly Burns is one of the most high profile because he was a renowned player and has been a renowned pundit in all the years since. But I will definitely not be getting carried away, because what can a GAA president do ultimately? Anything that he suggests has to go through Congress. Anything that can be really put into action is done by the chief executive and central council. GAA president can argue for things and all of that kind of stuff, but at the end of it, I don't know how much he can do, really. So we'll see.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see. I know personally there's a couple of rules I would love if I could wave a magic wand and just make them happen overnight. The first one for me is glaringly obvious and has been ever since I started watching the sport, is just to use the countdown clock instead of this nonsense of adding on 3 minutes when it could be 5, but maybe it's 2, and then everybody's interpreting how long, and then they play 2 minutes extra than they said they would. And if you count down clock and it stops, the time isn't disputed, and that takes it out of the referee's hands. It just seems to make sense.
Yeah, that clock at a junior B game.
What?
How do you do a countdown clock at a junior B game?
Correct. I think that for those ones, you do go with how it's been. But at this, you do go with how it's been. But for the inter-county games, I would do what the LGFA have, a clock that stops anytime the ball goes out and it's counting down. But I would implement the rugby thing that once the hooter goes, you've one more play.
Yeah.
You've one more shot. And then it's undisputed then. Because if it's time wasting and the clock stops, well, then it's out of the referee's hands how much they have to add on, and they can just focus on refereeing the fouls in the game and everything like that.
Yeah, I don't know how big a deal the time thing is. Really. I think they've started.
It was a big issue in a Monaghan game. Do you remember 2020 when Dublin were, I think, 5 points behind going into injury time, and the ref played 9 minutes of additional time, and David Byrne hit the equaliser?
Yeah, but like the time that they add on, that was the first year of them adding on proper time. And I think everybody's happy enough with it now, aren't they? Like, they add on 5-6 minutes to every game.
Kind of. But it's just like when you're in the stadium and you hear, 3 minutes and you hear people around you be like,
Yeah, but you never hear 3 minutes anymore, though, do you? Like,
it's usually, you usually hear, I think you'll usually hear 3 or 4.
No, everything is 5 minutes now.
Really?
At the very least, yeah, because they add on.
I think the club final I think was 3, and there were people moaning about.
Yeah, but if you watch the club final is different to the intercounty scene. In the intercounty scene,
60.
Everybody uses all. It's 70 minutes, but all teams use all their substitutes. So you're talking 10 substitutes have come on, and maybe one blood sub. You watch the club finals. Club finals, they have massive panels, but they have very few clubs have more than 17 players that they're going to trust to play in an All-Ireland final. So they stick the 3 minutes is just about all they add on in the provincial and All-Ireland club stages, because a lot of teams only use like 2 subs, 3 subs. So I don't know that the timekeeping is that big a deal. I think they've kind of fixed it by adding on proper amounts of time. I don't know how long you want these games to go on either. Like these players are playing 80-minute games. If you keep stopping the clock, they could end up being out there for 80, 85, 90 minutes. And they're amateurs at the back of it,
I think there's just one that I would do it how the LGFA do it, that they don't stop it, say, when somebody's about to take a free, or they don't stop it when, when someone's about to take a kick out.
What I think there's definitely an argument for it in when there's a black card. Like I think there's.
Oh yeah, that's painfully obvious.
Now,
all of a sudden you have cramp or something like, and the countdown continues for your black card. That's stupid. But apart from that, I think when the hooter goes, I think it would be deadly, because if the hooter went in Croke Park and everybody knew you only had one more shot and you were a point behind or it was level, I think the drama would be incredible. If you knew you only had one shot, it'd be like our kind of buzzer beater almost in basketball, that this is it, this is your last chance, and it would give way to some potential iconic winners.
So are you telling me that in a Croke Park game currently, when there's only 1 point between the teams, or the teams are level and one of the teams is attacking, are you telling me that you don't feel the drama at that point?
Of course, I do.
Okay, so why do you need a hooter for the drama?
I do, but say in certain instances, it's a very good question. I'll give you the examples that I'm thinking of here. So Cork Donegal 2012, Colm O'Neill gets a free, and it's one that he might go for goal, and he asks the ref, "Are you gonna blow the whistle?" And the ref kind of is like, "Can't really tell you that," and then Colm O'Neill fires it over the bar, and then the ref blows the whistle immediately after Donegal go through to the final. 2013, Cillian O'Connor takes 2 frees against Dublin. He puts them both over the bar, runs out of time. If they know exactly how long they have left, if they can look up and say, right, we have 30 seconds to get one score, and then the hooter goes and we've one more attack.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
I think it takes away the confusion, and again, crucially, it takes it out of the referee's hands that he can go. He doesn't need to go, oh, will I let them have one more attack? It's out of your hands. Once the hula goes, there's no interpretation, there's no human decision. It's an AI clock that makes the call, and nobody can argue with it.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure it's that big a deal, but sure. Maybe.
I think it was one that I noticed. I think it was one that I noticed particularly around the Monaghan Dublin game in the league that few years ago. But as you said,
Look,
it doesn't seem to
Monaghan
be
gave
as
up.
big an
Monaghan
issue.
gave up a 10-point lead that night. They bloody didn't deserve to. They should have been
that
out
was
the
the issue.
that
Yeah.
game long before Davy Byrne sallied forward. So I would be blaming the Monaghan team that night now rather than the referee.
Mm-hmm. But then the last question that I wanted to ask you. So 2 more questions for you. Moving from that period where Kerry then won back to back, along with obviously Dublin coming in with everything, the rise of social media was massive, and all of a sudden you had sports podcasts popping up, and you're a regular guest, of course, on Second Captains, which is one of my favorites, one of my dad's favorites, as I was telling you off air as well. How did you adapt to that? Like that, the whole social media world of coverage exploded at that time.
How did you adapt to that? I don't know really. You kind of do what you do. You have your core work. My core work is for the Irish Times. I've always enjoyed doing like radio. I would have going back to the sort of mid 2000s. I would have done an awful lot with the off the ball lads, as they were. So before they became the Second Captains lads, but even since they left News Talk, I'd have a great relationship with say Joe Malloy and Jerry Gilroy and the off the ball guys that are there currently. I don't particularly enjoy radio and podcasts if I'm completely honest about it. I any sort of small sort of social media storms I've ever gotten myself into are generally because I've said something on a podcast that I hadn't thought out completely. Whereas when I'm writing something, I sort of sit down and I have fully formed thoughts and I have logical, cogent opinions that I kind of think out. Whereas I find, podcasting a bit kind of. I can kind of take myself down on tangents that aren't fully thought out, and that's how I get myself into trouble a bit. But look, it's sports trouble; it's not actual trouble, so it doesn't really matter. But I definitely I did a podcast in the Irish Times for a while, just a general sports podcast that was kind of using our sort of array of sports journalists and the different sort of subject areas that they covered, like golf and rugby and GA and soccer and all of that. And I wouldn't say I loved it, but I think there was a bit of value in it. It kind of got killed off by the pandemic, and we've never really resuscitated it properly.
That's interesting because a lot of podcasts emerged because of the pandemic.
Well, right, yeah. Whereas ours just kind of died a death. Well, put it this way: the pandemic happened, and all sport globally disappeared for 3 months, and we were busy enough trying to fill 4 sports pages in the newspaper every day when there was no sport happening. So we decided that putting out a sports podcast on top of that was maybe a bridge too far. But I don't know. Like, I find the social media thing interesting in that it kind of ebbs and flows. Definitely there was a phase around sort of 2012, 2013 where we all thought as sports journalists that Twitter was going to be the thing that would save newspapers because we could bring our own stories to a new audience and they could find the newspaper that way. And so the onlineification of the newspaper didn't necessarily need to be such a bad thing because here was a way of pointing people who may not come across the newspaper ordinarily, here is a way of pointing them at the content in the newspaper. But we were, of course, incorrect in that. Twitter and Facebook basically ate up all newspaper advertising and sounded even a louder death knell for newspapers than was originally the case. And that wasn't gonna. We weren't gonna offset all that loss of advertising by pointing an extra 20 people at an article that I had written about, I don't know, an All Ireland hurling final. So I find it interesting. I find Twitter, very tiring in a way. I find that I don't get this anywhere near the same enjoyment out of it as I used to. Like, I use it for finding articles now and putting out articles, but it used to be great crack. It used to be a great place to follow something. It used to be a kind of a very enjoyable social outlet, where you could, as you're watching, say, a big sporting event, you knew that there was ever a couple of hundred other people doing the same, and you could all snark at each other and it'd be forgotten the next day. But Jesus Christ, you can't make a joke now without it devolving into a row, and I fucking hate rowing with people in any context anyway, but certainly on Twitter about sport. Jesus Christ.
Oh, it's gone very toxic. But
even beyond toxic, like, it's just so pointless. Like, it's so, and it's so kind of, I am quite wary as well of trying to service Twitter listener or Twitter responders too much, because when it comes right down to it, like, there's such a small percentage of Irish people are on Twitter. It's like, is it even double figures? Like that are regular daily users of Twitter? Like, it's probably 8% of the Irish population. So, and of that, how many of them are into sport? And of that, how many of them are into, say, GAA? So really, you're talking to a tiny slice of a tiny slice of a tiny slice of a tiny slice of people. And why would you then tailor your content to such a tiny slice of a tiny slice of a tiny slice of a tiny slice? Aren't you then responding to a minuscule number of people when really your gig is to reach a maximum number of people? So that's a very roundabout way of saying that I don't really take Twitter very seriously, and I don't really take Facebook very seriously. And my Instagram game is appalling. It's just it's an old man Instagram game. And I'm not on TikTok. So I do try. I do keep an eye on all of these things, because I know that that's where the future is, and I don't want to be left behind by it on any level. But I also know that the work itself has to live and die by its own merits. You can't take social media comment on your work too seriously. Look, obviously, when people pick holes in something or say you're wrong about something, you have to sit and ask yourself those questions. Of course you do. There's absolutely no divine right to be correct in anything. Right? I completely get that. And very often when somebody picks me up on something, I come back and say, you know what, you're absolutely right. That was my fuck up. I was wrong. I didn't think that through properly. So yeah, when you've made a mistake, it's worth, listening to social media. But too much of journalism, I find, tailors itself for how social media might react. And I think that's very dangerous. I think even if even if you end up with good work, you sort of got there by the wrong reasons, and it won't always work. You'll end up trying to appeal to too small a slice of the people you need to appeal to, and ultimately that's going to be harmful. If we want paid media to survive, you gotta get away from just talking to a small amount of people.
Yeah, that's it. And okay, you've given great answers, and definitely the good answer about not being intimidated by anyone. But surely to God, you were slightly bit intimidated by this fella. This is one of my favorite photos. And that, like, I've met you in person. You're not a small bloke, but Gearóid Hegarty is.
I'm a very small man.
Gearóid Hegarty is massive, though.
He's a big
that
dude.
Photo is absolutely insane.
Yes, and if people were eagle-eyed when it was enough there, the man is standing in his fucking socks, and he's still.
Yeah, we were taking a look. Is he? Oh, he is.
Yeah.
He's in his socks.
He's in his socks.
Absolutely huge.
Yeah, he's a big dude. Yeah, and worse, that was after the 2021 All Ireland final. Yeah, there was. It wasn't the absolute empty 2020 All Ireland final. It was the 2021 where the stadium was half full, and I waited and waited outside the Limerick dressing room for well over an hour to see could I get talking to any players, and the only reason that I knew that they'd have to come out was because their post-match meal was being laid out on the table outside, and so that's what he has in his hand there. That's his curry chip or whatever he's going back in to eat. And so not only was he towering over me, his food was getting cold. So he was very sound. He's a good lad, Gearóid. But that happened because that exact spot where I'm standing outside the Limerick dressing room there is directly across from the place under the Hogan stand where the press photographers do all their work after a game. So they go there and they pick out what photos that they're taking and they're sending to the newspapers and all of that. So they have a little room there where they can sit and do all that, because like press photography, you get rained on all the time. So they have a little room there. And the great sports photographer, James Crombie, who works for the Info Sports Photography Agency, who is like the man, like he's a genius. He's an absolute genius. Anybody with any interest in photography at all, he does some amazing wildlife photography, bird murmurations and stuff like that. But you should check out James Crombie. And the little fucker was sitting looking out that little room, and I was standing right across from him, and he took a snap and sent it to me afterwards. Yes, as you can probably guess,
he's the one who took this one, is he?
That's exactly it. Yeah, he's sitting in his little photographer's room, and he took that of me. And so you talk about social media. I immediately put that up on Twitter that night because I am.
Your caption was brilliant as well. Your caption was brilliant.
But you gotta allow people to. You gotta allow people to laugh at you. Like you can't take all of this too seriously. Like it's just sport at the back of it all. And I am a very small man, Seamus. There's no doubt about it. I'm about 5'7", like, and he is very much not 5'7". So there you go.
Well, it was one of my favorite captions. The one intimidating motherfucker and Gearóid Hegarty.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You have to back yourself up with social media when you're able to come up with captions like that. But listen, Malachy, it's been a great chat. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Not at all, Seamus.
Hopefully, I'll see you over the 2024 season.
See you around the way. Thank you so much for asking me.
No problem.